Zach, I decided that it's time to look at a new theory given that the legacy format is not going to change between now and Eternal Weekend.
Prudent.
Essentially, I want to chat a little bit about some stuff that I've been experimenting with because I've been thinking about, okay, if the format's not going to change and there are the current pillars that have been locking Legacy into what it is, and those pillars currently are like Ancient Tomb, Days Wasteland, Urza Saga. If you're not playing one of the pillars, you're probably doing it wrong. And I decided to, all of the things that I've been doing, I've been sort of thinking about how do I combat the pillars? If there's a way to be anti-pillar, is there a way to do that without being just a worse version of whatever? So even though I know that I am self-handicapping within the confines of the archetype that I enjoy, but what is the way to minimize that handicap to as much as possible, if not eliminate it?
This episode of Eternal Durdles is sponsored by Cardmill, the first automated scanner and sorter built specifically for trading card game players. With its intentionally compact design, Cardmill uses AI-powered recognition to identify each card and sync inventory with real-time pricing, batching up to 300 cards at a time by name, set, color, or type. Collection data is securely stored in the Cardmill network, giving players full access to their cards through an easy-to-use web portal. Cardmill supports Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Flesh and Blood, Disney Lorcana, Star Wars Unlimited, and many more to come. Created by software engineer and longtime Magic the Gathering player Jonathan Dumanis, Cardmill launches on July 22nd on Kickstarter with early bird pricing starting at $350. Backers receive lifetime access to all software updates and new features. Go to cardmill.com to learn more and reserve your path to the future of card sorting. Okay, so let me get this straight. You're saying are you saying you're thinking about playing Days Wasteland, Ancient Tomb, or Urza Saga, or you're saying you think you figured out a way to not play them and keep up?
I'm thinking about it holistically differently than I was before, given the current metagame that we're going to be in for the next year. And I'll expand upon what I mean by that. Hold on a sec. Excuse me. I'll expand upon what I mean by that and where the idea has come from. Initially, what I'm looking at is that looking at the pillars of the format, not just as pillars that are the best things to be doing, but essentially the laws of Legacy.
Okay.
These are the pillars, instead of being these are the best things to do, these are the laws by which the games must be played within, and then within that, you can do whatever it is that you want. So while that may sound that's just what pillars are, I'm saying that it's a different lens. It's not oh, these are the best things to do, therefore you could do things to try and beat up on those things. It's no, those things are not beatable things. Unless you are doing those. It's essentially what I'm looking at it as is, what if we were the scientists in the lab? You wouldn't go and try and pitch a hypothesis to your fellow researchers that only works if you presume that gravity doesn't exist. It's a law of the universe. Gravity does exist.
Gravity's a theory.
Well,
go on.
But whatever. But you know what I'm trying to say,
kidding.
Right?
Yeah, of course.
Essentially, you're if we were to approach okay, we want to figure out what the legacy power level thing to do is, right? I'm trying to ABC deck build, as I always have, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's the legacy power level thing to do? And typically the way you do that is, well, in order to be a legacy power level thing, it has to be both powerful and presumably good against the metagame that it's going into to be a brew worth exploring. And if you are going into that thinking that I'm going to go into that assuming that I can beat the laws of Legacy, where before it's oh yeah, I try and contend against the pillars, but now if I'm looking at it as no, you can't actually contend with the laws. They are the laws of the format. That is the confines by which the format must be operated within, and to do anything that's not those things means that anything legacy power level that presumes it's not one of those things, booing it, it's just not a feasible choice to start with. So if I'm not playing Ancient Tomb, or I'm not playing Days Wasteland, or I'm not playing Urza Saga, or the pillars, if I'm not playing Dark Ritual or Entomb Reanimate, then you have to assume that your brew is not even worth exploring because you have to contend against the laws. So, not saying that it's impossible. Of course, this is a subjective thing. But the way that I've approached brewing recently is, these are the laws. How do I contend within the laws that are given within this in the circumstance? So that's a long-winded way of saying yeah, Phil, obviously, but it has changed my approach to card choices, which is the thing that I want to talk about, because I think that maybe other people are thinking in a similar fashion, and then previous theory episodes, this might give us the language with which to articulate those things so that we can talk about the card choices and why they matter. So do you want me to dive into that?
Yeah, I do. I want to note here. This is going to be the culmination of a couple of things. We discussed this, but there was also I had a thought, and we'll go into this in a separate episode with the format being sort of locked for the next 5 months. This allows people sort of an unfettered amount of knowledge as far as what is stable, as far as the game is concerned, to kind of decide to brew from. And I think this is sort of the first step in that process. You're like, okay, we're locked into this. We kind of know what people are playing. And many people, myself included, are like, I'm locked for a deck now. Like, I'm ready. I know what I'm going to be playing for Eternal Weekend. And within that, I think the metagame is stable enough that if you're the type of person that you are who likes to brew or figure out the metagame outside of that, this is a ripe environment to be able to figure that out, because not a lot is going to change between now.
Yeah, it'll just be whatever cards are influxed from new sets, right? Which there are 4 new sets with Commander products
Right
before
now,
we get
there's
to
currently 4 new sets happening. I feel like, yes. Well, we got the Final Fantasy sets haven't really borne out yet.
Yeah, well, Final Fantasy's been out. So if people want to, Edge of Eternities is currently in spoiler season, but then there's everything except for the Avatar during the holiday season. Like, that'll happen.
Okay.
That is presumably, I don't know the schedule, but that's presumably legal after Eternal Weekends are done. So, like, the Halloween set will be out for the second EW.
Is that Spider-Man?
I think that's Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, okay.
So, right. So like the Spider-Man set, and we've seen some of the Spider-Man cards, and they already, like, there's already one card from Spider-Man that's been spoiled, which is like Pumpkin Bombs or something. It's a red artifact that,
there's a few cards that have been spoiled from Spider-Man.
And that the Pumpkin Bombs thing, like, when it first was spoiled, I know that, like, the Mono Red Painter players were talking about it because it's, like, got utility with the Goblin package. That's also, like, just a super good utility piece. So it's, like, possible that when those things come up, like, the metagame shifts a little bit because Red Painter gets a boon for something we already know about. But other than that, though, I don't think anything right now is, like, unless something is printed that, like, arbitrarily creates a new law of legacy.
Yeah, like, or an archetype or something. Yeah.
Right, like, and that's the thing. When I talk about this idea of the laws of legacy, the laws of legacy are not, fixed in that, like, they could just power creep something that becomes a new law of legacy, and then something else gets pushed out and is no longer powerful enough to contend in that space and just becomes a powerful card, but is not quite good enough. But, like, Urza Saga, when they printed it, it just became a law of legacy. It's just like, if you're not doing this as one of the things,
And that's I think the thesis of our previous episode we were talking about Premiere is to sort of create a format that was the fighting back on that like angle. Is like to put a situation in where the power creep is lowered to the point where that sort of thing doesn't happen as often as it seems to happen now. But that's, again, besides the point. Let's talk about what you're talking.
Yeah, to cap the Premiere thing, that way people can keep talking about it, because we started a new channel in our Discord about that and about, like, additional formats. The creator of Heritage actually popped in and was like, hey guys, like, watch the episode, and, like, gave some feedback and stuff, and that was, like, really cool. So, like, being able to, like, start talking about that as, like, a potential new, like, updated, like, version of pre-modern for, like, the legacy folk, even though it's not a rotating format. Essentially, like, I think I've mentioned it before, but the best way that anybody has ever summed up pre-modern for me as a legacy player was our buddy Adam, who was like, yeah, legacy is really about, like, the top 10 to 12 cards of your deck are the only thing that matter. That's, like, how games last. Whereas pre-modern is about, like, the top 22 cards of your deck. So it's like, you see so many more cards, there's so many more interactions, because the differential of cards that matter over the course of a game for how long those games last is just, like, so vastly different that it just changes the experience entirely.
The power level's much more flat, yeah.
And therefore more cards matter. And I think that's like what the intent of Premiere is. It's like, it's to be the legacy where the top 25 cards of your deck matter as opposed to the top 10. But, like, getting back to the idea for the laws of legacy, this idea came to me when I played against Breakfast. And previously I felt like I had a really good game against Breakfast. Like, I had a good plan. It was, like, the only thing that I really needed to care about that I hadn't that, like, doesn't have, like, an easy solve is Teferi Time Raveler. Like, if Teferi sticks and then they just get to do whatever they want, like, considering that the stack is now turned off, like, the war just became about Teferi, and then, like, you had to not die to Urza Saga, but then otherwise you were more or less contained with being able to fight the combo, because Cavern of Souls was a huge problem, but they couldn't Cavern of Souls both halves of their combo unless they found 2 Cavern of Souls, and, like, you can just get into positions where, like, even if they do the cavern, then you can still fight on the stack as long as the Teferi's not on the table. So, like, you cast the thing, it's uncounterable, but then when you cast the second thing, it's like, okay, I can remove the first thing that's, the enabler for the Cephalid Illusionist or whatever, right? But if Teferi's on the table, you just can't do that. So the war just became about, like, save all my counter magic for Teferi, use my removal for that impending, like, window where even if something is if 2 things are uncounterable, you can still stop the combo. But now that Voice of Victory exists, they can now Cavern of Souls through the Teferi effect. And so it shuts off not only the blue half of the deck that I play, but it shuts off the white half of the deck that I play, which is to say that you can't use counter magic or removal. It's all blank. Everything is blank. I was like I got bodied by Cephalid Breakfast last 2 weeks ago, last week, whatever it was, and I was like, where was the window? There must have been something. I'm literally sitting here with 4 cards and interaction, and it just doesn't feel like it was ever close, even though we like traded 2 counter spells. I had a removal spell plus another removal spell in hand, and it just literally came down to like Voice of Victory plus stuff, or like a combination of like the multiple things plus. It just became so overwhelming without like a significant noticeable flaw in like where the gameplay happened, but I'm still just sitting there with like a mostly full grip of good cards. And so I'm like, where was the issue? Like I'm like asking my opponent, like, did you see where you thought like, oh, that was a mistake from his part? And he was like, not really. It kind of just like felt easy. And then I asked another Cephalid Breakfast player who like has been playing for a long time, what, like, where is the window here now that the Voice of Victory is like available in this deck, and like between Teferi and Voice and Cavern of Souls and like all this stuff? I'm like, where is the bottleneck? Like, what is the thing that you fear outside of Blood Moon if you're not a Blood Moon deck? And he was like, I think you need to assess this deck entirely different now that we have Voice of Victory, which is, he said, don't look at it as a way that like your cards are ever going to matter. You have to look at it like it's Cloud Post. He's like, you have to pivot post board to treat Breakfast as Cloud Post. Now, that hit me because I'm like, Breakfast and Cloud Post are so vastly different in terms of what they are. But from like the interactive, like mid-range control-y side of the spectrum, really what it meant was we have reached the pinnacle of where we no longer ever need to care about whatever interaction you have, because we know we can always turn it off. Like, we can voluntarily, when we feel like it, with Voice of Victory and Cavern of Souls, turn off everything with no window for you to ever do anything and then kill you. Because Voice is uncounterable, so you can't be stopped on a stack, and then once it touches the table, you can't remove it with white cards. So, like, there is no window to stop this play, so you have to figure out something entirely different, which is not any of the cards that currently exist in the game. And so he's like, you just have to look at it as Cloud Post.
Finding the right high-end cards for legacy, vintage, pre-modern, or old-school Magic can be challenging. That's where friends 3-for-1 trading come in.
3-for-1 Trading is one of Europe's top Magic the Gathering retailers with an incredible selection of premium singles, sealed product, and even full sets, all available with free, fast, and secure worldwide shipping.
They add fresh inventory every Wednesday with weekly deals and discounts. So whether you're hunting for that elusive piece of power, a legacy staple, or something spicy for your collection, they've got you covered.
First high-end orders over $500 or 500 euros, use the code EDFREE to get free worldwide shipping.
Check them out now at the number 3, the number 4, the number 1.gg/ED. That link takes you right to the shop and helps support the channel.
Huge thanks to 3-for-1 Trading for supporting the Legacy community. Now back to the show.
I think, Phil, just to put sort of a bit of knowledge on this as a Cephalid Breakfast player, right, and kind of get at what you're saying, is that in the Cloud Post matchup versus Miracles, Cloud Post there's no onus on Cloud Post to react or act at all, because your win plan is such a late game win plan that the Cloud Post player gets plenty of time to set up and do their thing. And then by the time it happens, Emrakul, what are you going to do about an Emrakul? You're not going to do anything, right?
Yeah, so go ahead, sorry.
So to finish this up, as a Breakfast player, if you really understand the Miracles versus Breakfast matchup, and not many do, because there's not a lot of Miracles players out there, right? There's no pressure, right? So all I have to do as a Cephalid Breakfast player is set myself up for success, and then bonk you on one turn.
That bonk, and when you say that there's no pressure, there used to be pressure in that. If from my POV, listener, insert whatever it is that you would use if you were on the like a fair controlling side of the spectrum with whatever tool you're using. But for me, like I would use, it's like my pressure could be, it's like I can stick a counterbalance and then stop whatever it is that you're doing. I could play like a bunch of interaction and then enough card advantage, because that's where I can leverage more than you. You have combo pieces in your deck. I have card advantage in my deck. So I can leverage my card advantage to have more interaction to win the counter war battle. But
you could do that, not anymore though.
That's what I'm saying. So all of the things that were the threats, like card advantage, a pseudo lock piece like a counterbalance, like all of that stuff, that is just blanked by Cavern of Souls, Voice of Victory. Like, yeah, exactly. Two mana turns off everything.
You need what, 6 mana for your combo to go off? You need Voice of Victory, Nadu. You don't even need Nadu, right?
You need 5 mana.
You need Voice of Victory, a Shuko, and Illusionist.
So
we can just assume that you're not playing Macabre, and we win the game.
Right, and then Macabre would be able to be beat by Memory Journey anyway. So
correct.
So like it's just there is no there's no window because you can't interact with Cavern of Souls before it does its damage. And then now that Voice of Victory can be put through via Cavern of Souls, it means that there's no window for you to use white cards, so it obsolete that window of the two pieces coming together where you can remove the enabler in some capacity. And then also Urza Saga gets to put in a Shuko for free, so like that's also an enabler.
Yeah, I just thought it was important to like kind of level set what you meant by the Cloud Post thing, because it threw me off for a second, but I completely understand now. Like if you're approaching the matchup in that particular way, like it makes sense.
I'm also saying though that like this isn't an episode about this particular matchup. This was just the impetus to make me start thinking about the laws of legacy differently, and why I'm now thinking about them as the laws of legacy as opposed to anything else, because we have reached the paradigm where I think going against any of the, like in this case, like I consider the laws of legacy to be like Dark Ritual, Ancient Tomb. I'm sorry, Dark Ritual combo. Ancient Tomb plus anything, Urza Saga plus anything, Days Wasteland plus anything, or any of those things with an A plus B combo. Like A plus B, and then they'll incidentally have one of those things. Like if you're A plus B comboing, you're doing it with either Dark Ritual, or like Dark Ritual Doomsday, or you're doing it with Days Wasteland, like in Tomb Reanimate, it's Days Wasteland, or you're doing it with like A plus B Ancient Tomb, like Show and Tell. So like even like all of the combos that currently exist are within the confines of these. We've called them pillars before, and I'm now talking about them as laws, because in this instance with Breakfast, when my local player was like, yeah, look at it as Cloud Post, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. I had never really thought about it that way, but maybe you just need to pivot now that there's Voice of Victory thing is here.
And how do you, just wondering now, how do you approach the Cloud Post matchup?
Well, this is where I was like, the Cloud Post matchup, typically what you would like do post board, like I remember in the previous format where I was like on a tear, where I feel like I had solved the format, but it was back when Reanimator was still on, like, it was during like the Psychic Frog, Troll of Khazad-dûm, like era of Reanimator. And that when like the deck was Psychic Frog and Troll of Khazad-dûm, like if you were on Source of Plowshares, it was just like a dream matchup. I would be happy to run into it, all 15 rounds of a major event.
We watched I felt like Donk Bosch at Vegas, right?
It's like when you're playing the thing that ETBs that doesn't have any disruptive text against me, like a Psychic Frog, and then you have to untap and attack, which means that I can trade my Prismatic Ending at mana parity for your thing. That's exceptional, right? We talked before where I'm like, if you're playing a blue-white X deck that's using Prismatic Endings, you're only as good as your Prismatic Endings. And so like I would play like really shitty mana bases in order to leverage Prismatic Ending to go up to 3 and 4, because if you can't remove things that if you can't unburden the Swords of Plowshares, take some load off of Swords of Plowshares with Prismatic Ending, then you're just you're softer for every instance that the Prismatic Ending can't work, right? But then Prismatic Ending is just a bad card because so many things can happen now where you never actually get the window to even cast a sorcery speed thing. When talking about like the Breakfast to Cloud Post analogy, I was like, okay, in the previous format when I did that, what I did was I played, like, I had 4 basics in my deck and then I had 4 Wastelands in the board. And against matchups that didn't pressure my mana base, I would swap the basics for Wastelands with Lorien Revealed to tie the room together to be my mana fixing, because you can play the Wasteland and then still Lorien Revealed. And then I had Monastery Mentors as a way to pivot to just be a little bit faster, right? So I had all the same elements.
Add the pressure, right? That's the clue.
Pressure. Yeah. But like the pressure then was really like, okay, I'm playing Wasteland as a way to try and stop at the time what I considered the pillar, which was Urza Saga. And then I'm playing Mentor as a way to combat the problem of that matchup, which was Teferi, right? So I'm like, the two things that I care about in this matchup are specifically Urza Saga and Teferi. And Urza Saga is checked by Wasteland, Teferi is checked by Monastery Mentor, and then in order to stop the combo, which was Cavern of Souls, I had that window where I could convert a removal spell to stop the combo from happening, right? So I was like, that was my plan for that. But then it also incidentally happened that like the Wasteland Monastery Mentor, like, pivot post board was also how I would compete against anything that like didn't care about counterbalance, right? If you were going big, if you were an Ancient Tomb or whatever, I would just board in the Wastelands and Monastery Mentors, and that would be my way to check like Karns and Ancient Tombs, or it'd be my way to check Cloud Post, or like the pressure from Monastery Mentor would also check the One Ring. So like the combination of all those cards solved a bunch of problems that counterbalance otherwise couldn't solve in main deck. So that was the pivot plan. But then that changes now that Cavern of Souls has Voice of Victory to shut everything off, right? Now Wasteland doesn't stop Cavern of Souls, and Monastery Mentor, it doesn't matter. You're dead because the Voice of Victory doesn't let you interact. So like all that stuff is suddenly just obsoleted. Like it just doesn't matter anymore. Because now the game is not about necessarily just Teferi and Urza Saga. It's also that Voice of Victory now can put with a Cavern of Souls can just blank literally every text box in my deck. So I was thinking to myself, okay, well, if that's is there a way to actually contend against those things? And my conclusion was, no, there's not. For that particular thing.
Sure, yeah.
Like the only actual, like even remotely close to playable thing for that particular play pattern of Cavern of Soulsing through a Voice of Victory and just holding the combo and then comboing you to where you know that nothing can happen. The only real interaction with that is like Subtlety. Like Subtlety, the Voice of Victory. But if they just choose to put the Voice of Victory back on top of the deck and you aren't about to kill them on the following turn, they just draw it and Cavern of Souls just let them do it again. So then, like, not only do you need Subtlety, you also then need to, like, as the guy who's played the most Predictive, probably anybody that's listening to this podcast at the moment, like, you then need, like, Subtlety plus Predict, and now you're just playing a horrifically shitty deck, right? Like, that's not playable. So there just isn't anything that exists to deal with the Cavern of Souls problem.
Portent?
So,
Subtlety plus Portent, right?
Yeah, but then you're still playing bad cards, right? And I played a lot of Portent.
Yeah. Hey, for what it's worth, just today, my round 4 or 5 opponent played a Portent on me, and I was like, I'm going to tell Phil, and he's like, Portent actually just won a challenge.
Yeah, no, Portent has won an Eternal Weekend, my guy.
Yeah. Since you're enjoying the show, please like and subscribe the video. It helps the channel grow.
Support Eternal Durdles on Patreon so we can create even more content and cover events.
Patreon supporters get an ad-free RSS feed. You can even join our deck donation tier to get your very own episode.
Join the Durdle Maniacs at patreon.com/eternaldurdles. Now back to the show. It's a fine card, but like at the same time, if you're thinking I need to play Portent because I need to Subtlety the Cavern of Souls target, like you're like, okay, we are way off the rails. So there just isn't a solution to that problem. And so we're 20 minutes in, and now we're finally going to talk about the Laws of Legacy. That led to me to go, okay, if there legitimately is just not a way to solve this thing that exists, like the card pool that exists does not let this problem be solved, then we have to like look at that as that is a law. That is an irrefutable law of the format that we cannot contend with. We just have to accept that is an unsolvable thing from a brewer's perspective, right? Like there is not the cards or tools available to me as a brewer to solve that problem. So then I was like, okay, well, when I looked at it through that lens of like essentially like zooming out to like, okay, this is not a solvable problem. So what does that mean? What do I do now? Then I went, okay, what are the other things that are, what are the other things that would presumably be the laws of the format if I like endeavored to look at it that way? And I was like, well, there's nothing that's like hard and fast, right? Like there's nothing actually deterministic, but Days Wasteland has been the best deck since its inception, right?
Agreed. So
yeah. So then I was looking, that's what led me to, what if what if we just viewed all of the pillars as the laws of legacy? And then what does that mean if you were a brewer going forward? Well, that would mean that in order to brew at all, you just have to accept that you need to use one of the laws. Now, I get that this might be like, Phil, finally you've come around to the idea that you just need to play a pillar, of course. But like, I didn't come to like, I need to play pillar on power level. You know, I came to this conclusion on, no, you need to be able to, you have to play the laws of the format because they're just actually are not the tools to beat them, which is different. That's different. Like I would come to being like, I can solve problems. And it's like, well, if this is a law, then you can't try and unsolve the law. And so then I was looking at, okay, how would I make miracles work in a Days Wasteland? Now, this is where I thought this would be worth it for an episode. Days Wasteland has always been used as a way to compress the game as much as possible, right? Like, if I'm playing Days Wasteland, I'm doing it with Entomb Reanimate, or I'm doing it with Delver DRC.
Yeah, generally like a protect the queen strategy, yeah.
A protect the queen strategy of some kind that is trying to end the game as fast as possible. But if we assume the position that the laws of legacy are the laws and therefore work under anything that we want to do, as long as we are using the laws, then that could mean that what if we looked at Days Wasteland as a means to extend the game rather than shorten it? You're like, Phil, what are you talking about, man? So I set off to do the challenge of, okay, if I accept that the laws of legacy are the laws of legacy, and I play Days Wasteland, but I want to play it in the deck that I want to play, and then see if there's a way to do that, then it led me to, okay, what is the legacy power level thing to do? And then how do I use the law to apply to that? And then where do we go from there? So what I realized, though, is that, let's say the average game right now in Legacy ostensibly ends on turn 2, right? Entomb Reanimate
Ostensibly, yeah, I get you.
Oops,
The attacks have to happen, but the game is over.
Yeah, like it's like, yes, if an attraction hits the table, like, yeah, the game is not actually over, but is it? But you're worried, is it really? Like, same thing. Like, if
Our
somebody
listeners
puts
are
in,
smart enough to understand that. I think.
yeah. If somebody puts in a nomads on, like, can just turn 1 nomads, turn 2 Cephalid breakfast kill you with backup, or like the top decks of the format are all like they can kill you on turn 2, like turn 2 the One Ring off of Ancient Tomb and Fast Mana or whatever. Like, yeah, like the game's not actually over, but like, are you ever actually coming back from a turn 2 One Ring if it sticks? Like, probably not, right? So yes, the game is not actually over, but it effectively is, ostensibly is. So, but I was like, okay, if I'm endeavoring to presume that the legacy power level thing that I want to do doesn't work within the first 2 turns of the game. Like, let's say the legacy power level thing that I need to do, insert whatever that is, needs the first 3 turn cycles to exist. I need the average length of a game to be 3 turns in order for my legacy power level thing to have text. But if my legacy power level thing has text, then I can like build around that and have a functioning deck that can compete against what the metagame is at the time.
And this is where Days Wasteland comes into play.
So I'm using Days Wasteland as a means to like get to turn 3. Right now, there are confines to Days Wasteland. It's really tough to play anything that's higher than a 2 CMC spell, right? But I'm not saying that like, oh, I want to play 3 drops. Days Wasteland says don't play 3 drops or 4 drops really in your deck, right? But it's not saying that the games can't go past turn 2. It's saying your curve has to be it has a certain compression point, but not necessarily that the game does. And so I was like, okay, what would a list that I want to play look like if the goal of my Days in Wastelands that I'm using are to like extend the game rather than try and shorten it or back the Save the Queen thing to like, you know, whatever. So, but that then led me to, okay, what are the other tools that I could use to essentially extend the game within the new laws? And so something that I've been testing is Curse of Silence. Now, I'm bringing in Curse of Silence post board because I was trying to find an answer to the Cavern of Souls problem, and I was like, you can't beat the Cavern of Souls, but if I know that Cavern of Souls on Voice Victor, or Cavern of Souls on Cephalid Illusionist, or Cavern of Souls on Nadu or whatever is the choke point, then I can just go Curse of Silence, which is a 1-mana enchantment that enchants a player, and it says you get to name a card, and then that if they want to cast that card, it costs them 2 more, so it taxes that card, and then if they do cast it, you can sacrifice the curse to draw a card, so you can cash in the curse if we get to that point in the game. So I was like, Curse of Silence, like the window, it doesn't stop the thing. They just can play 2 additional mana sources and then, you know, cast the thing. So it's not stopping the problem, but it's extending the window by which the game can go, right? Like if my opponent is on Entomb Reanimate, okay, well, if I can go turn 1 Curse, and if they go Entomb, then I get to go, okay, I'll just name Reanimate. They can't cast the Reanimate on the follow-up. And then if they want to play their 2-drop, then the Days will catch it, right? So it's just like extending the play to be a longer game. Now, this might just be like, yeah, these are ABCs, but I'm telling you, like, the way that my thought process came to this is looking at, like, Laws of Legacy versus Pillars. And then, so I was like, okay, but if I want to extend the game, then I want to, like, what are the ways that I can win the game? Like, what are the ways that work within this new mindset, essentially? And then the other things that I came to is like, I want to extend the game. So if my curve needs to stop at 2, but I want the game to go long, then I'm like, okay, well, look at ways to offset the bouncing of the Land of Days. So I've been on Search for Oscanta, which hasn't been playable in a decade.
It's been a minute. But, yeah. I love that card, but yeah, you're right.
But if my curve stops at, if essentially my curve, what I'm playing stops at 2, then I can go, okay, I can play this 2-drop. Like I'll still reach the point in the game where I can cast a 2-drop. But then, like, between the Days, the Wasteland, and the stuff that's otherwise disrupting the deck, it'll fill the graveyard, and then I'll get to buy back this land, flip it on the backside, and then that's just an additional. It's ramp, right? But it's ramp that is But you're seeing, like, I would never get to, oh, I should play Search for Oscanta. But I'm like also not thinking like, oh, Days Wasteland, of course, Search for Oscanta. Like, I have to get through the thought process of like, what is the point of the Days Wasteland in the deck that I want to play? And then all of a sudden, Search for Oscanta becomes an interesting tool because it works within that position. And then you can get to like, okay, now what works with that?
Yeah. Search for Oscanta, not an island.
Not an island. No. So it doesn't work with Mystic
Sanctuary. For your Mystic Sanctuary.
But that is to say, like, essentially what I wanted this episode to like endeavor to theory-wise is if you were to look at the people, the way that people have been playing the pillars of the Laws of Legacy have been pretty static, right? Like, Days Wasteland has always been the Days Wasteland where it just protects the combo that ends the game or protects the queen and it ends the game, and it's always to try to do it as fast as possible. But like, And there have been times where like people have played days in like, you know, control shells of old. Like there used to be old Miracles mentor builds, like back when Top was around, where people would play like 2 days or whatever, like as just a free spell with mentor, so you could tap it and then still cast a spell. It was another way to like, you know, check the old Liliana of the Veil at the time when there wasn't good planeswalker removal, because a 3-drop they would just like, you know, cast it into a daze, but then you would like have a way
This is
to
back
like,
when
have free spells.
when your biggest threat was Jund.
Yeah, I thought about this interaction. I thought about this interaction a long time ago, because that was literally the last time that Search of Kanta as Kanta was playable. Like the last time I like really played it legitimately was like during that era, like when Grixis control was a viable thing with like Deathfire Shaman. But like it like brought me back to, well, Daze always sucked in those builds, right? It was never really good. But I think it was never good because it was never actually like, it didn't have the Wasteland shell with it, or like it didn't play Daze Wasteland. It just played Daze as like this 2 of catch-all that like maybe works, maybe doesn't, but there was no way to really, you know, make it work or make it powerful. But now looking at like where we're at, and a lot of this also works because Lorien Revealed exists, and so that like Wasteland, it can fix your mana in the way that like Plains, like we talked about how like, you know, Top was really good, not because Top was exceptionally powerful, but because it just meant that you could cantrip off your planes, and that was really powerful. So like the offsetting of you being able to play a basic planes in your deck that never actually wanted it, because now you can cantrip, and that's really powerful. And so like Lorien Revealed sort of tied that room together when you could suddenly cycle and essentially cantrip with your planes. Wasteland Lorien Revealed has a similar energy. But then again, that also goes back to being able to feed the Search for Kanta and like all that stuff. But what I hope to impose here that other people can start to think about and like maybe flesh this idea out a little bit further with me is, okay, yeah, Urza Saga has only ever been used as like the combo piece tutor and then like the backdoor B plan. But like, is there another way like to think about what that is doing? Like, I don't know. I haven't thought about that far beyond Daze Wasteland yet, but like it was sufficient enough that I was like, we've only ever looked at the pillars really in the way that they have been so far. But like, if we viewed them not as just what we've always known them to be, but like nobody has ever, as far as I know, has ever looked at Daze Wasteland as a means to extend the game. Like that like, how do you intend to extend the game, dude? Oh, Daze Wasteland, of course. Like that has never been a thought process that's happened, and it may not be good enough, but it's a new interesting thing where it's like, well, we know that this is what the format is going to be. So what if we endeavor to look?
We know that this is what the format's going to be.
We know that that's what the format's going to be. Given that can you hear me?
You're using your MacBook microphone now.
I'm just gonna reload because I see it, but it's not letting me click my map. All right, that should be better. Yeah, cool. They just keep going. Yeah. So since we know that that's what Legacy is going to be for the next X months, it means that okay, now if that's the case, then we can brew within that space. But hey, everybody that's looking to brew, maybe change how we look at what even brews we're looking to try, and that includes card choices, right? Like I never would have come to Curse of Silence had I not thought differently about the pillars being the laws that are irrefutable. Because before it always seemed like like anytime somebody was like, oh, you want to be Urza Saga, it's like, okay, play Wasteland, but that the timing restriction of that kind of sucks. It's like, okay, but that doesn't solve the Cavern of Souls problem. That doesn't solve, you know, if somebody goes Ancient Tomb, it's like you got to catch it before they cast anything. Like if they go Ancient Tomb plus Lotus Petal plus 3-drop, well, the Wasteland's too slow. So it's like it's not actually solving the issues outright, right? It's not solving the pillar. So it's like, man, if these things are not actually solvable within the fastest, most efficient tools that we have available to those things, maybe those tools just don't exist. And if that's the case, then where do we go from there?
Final note on this idea about Wasteland and extending the game. Phil, I know you weren't playing at the time, and this is sort of common knowledge now, I feel like, for most people that have had one on the other side of the board of them. But when Rashad Import first got spoiled, it was seen as an aggressive card. A card to like buoy land destruction decks with like another way to do that. This is after Wasteland had rotated from standard. But the decks that really positioned themselves well with it were actually like mono blue counterspell decks that were able to just stop your opponent from hitting curve and then untap and then be like, okay, now we don't have to worry about them dropping something big on us. You know, I'll cast Evacuate as an instant speed at the end of the turn, untap, and now I can counter what's important as my opponent is still dealing with like trying to do one thing at a time, where I'm able to now two spell because I'm playing a lower curve, counter spells and whatnot. It's interesting. And I wonder if that might be a thing you want to try after this is like would Rashad Port work in this capacity as well?
Yeah, and
Just
like this may be just like every theory episode we've ever had. This may just be horseshit, and who actually knows? Like maybe people have already figured out the best thing to do, and it's the best thing to do. But like it's just a different way of thinking that we haven't ever, at least I haven't, or heard anybody else really explore. And it makes me think like, oh yeah, if the goal of what I want the legacy power level thing to be is blank, then how do I get to blank? And if the baseline of blank is I need X number of turns in order for that thing to even be live, then how do I do that? And it's like, well, if essentially, like, I remember when we talked about this previously, where it's like, yeah, the confines of the format is everything ends on turn 2, so your curve can't be higher than 2. And then also that means that, like, you want to get as few lands in your deck as possible, because then every land that you can't deploy is an additional mulligan, and we're looking to obsolete having to, like, take as many mulligans. So it's like, okay, well, at the time that made sense, and we're still sort of in that space. But when figuring that out, I was still being like, no, that we can do that and still beat the field at large, because at the time it was Psychic Frog, it was Troll of Khazad-dûm, Breakfast still around, but it didn't have Voice of Victory yet. Like essentially, the metagame was such that I was like, we can beat these things if we are just within the confines with which we need to survive, and then we can win the game. Where like that is no longer the case because of the tools that are available, between Tameo being able to bury you on turn 1 if you can't interact with it in a meaningful way, because there's no way to actually trade up with it. If somebody played a Psychic Frog and you played a Source of Plowshares, you traded up, right? Like that was time gained. But like that's not the case with Tameo. You're either trading at mana parity or you can't even move because they have the Brainstorm. So like that changes things. Bowmaster has Flash, so you're never actually going to be able to optimize your timing. Like they will always have the better timing, because Bowmaster can always just be the thing that responds at any point, because it is the one with Flash. And your sorcery speed stuff now no longer works, because like Prismatic Ending catching a Flash threat, that's tough. If not, it's shitty. Ponder can't play around a Bowmaster unless you just don't cast the Ponder, because then if they cast the Bowmaster, then you still need a way to remove the Bowmaster beforehand. But like, you know what I'm saying, right? Like essentially the format has shifted in a way where like what we talked about previously theory-wise doesn't necessarily hold up in the same context. So looking at it now, I endeavor to you, fellow brewers that are out there, if you were to abide by the laws, what does that mean? What cards suddenly can open up if we look at it through this lens and just accept our, Days Wasteland, Ancient Tomb overlords?
All right. Well, comment below if you think that Phil should test out Rashad Port, because that'll allow him to have an extra land in play. With that said, thank you everybody for watching, and we will catch you on the flip. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button.
You can also support us on patreon.com/EternalDurdles, which now offers the new Deck Donation tier.
During July, the Deck Donation patrons will get a 2-for-1 special, where both Phil and I will run your deck through a league.
I'll play literally whatever you want.
So brew your spiciest or stock us up with a stock list.
I'll literally play whatever you want.
Thanks for watching.